Are you going to stand there and do something?
My name is Sara Dee Brodrick, and I just started using both names very recently because when I was a child, I was raised in the Midwest, and everybody has two names. It's Betty Jo and Mary Lou and Susie Bell, and I was Sara Dee until I was about age 25, and then I decided that that was a very childlike name, and that I should be called Sara. And even though Sara is a very, very old name, there were not very many people in my generation that had that name. But if you've noticed, in the last 15 years, every kid in the world is named Sara. So in order to make myself a little different than all the thousands of little Saras that their mothers are calling them in the grocery store, I started signing my work Sara Dee and going by the name Sara Dee. But I answer to Sara as well. I am an artist and an art instructor. I work right now for Southwest Oregon Community College, and I'm teaching a drawing class there, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later on. I've taught in a number of colleges in California, and because I have lived in very small communities, if I lived in Orange County and was teaching at one of their big colleges, I would be the watercolor painter teacher, or the oil painting teacher, or the sculpture teacher, or the design teacher. But because I was in very small colleges, they expected you to be everything. So I kind of had to do a whole lot of things. I have a sculpture out here in the other gallery of a mermaid that's mine. She's made out of clay, and then you can see I brought in mostly watercolors today because that's what Greta said I had to do. I rule. Yeah, you're right. I said, well, I could do something else because Buzz did watercolor and Jay did watercolor, and I can't do a watercolor in an hour. I don't work that way. So that's my cop-out right off the bat is I am not going to start and finish a painting for you today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a lot of work. I'm going to show you supplies. I'm going to talk to you about the way I work. I'm going to paint some, and then I'm going to show you something that's almost finished. So that's kind of the way we're going to work. But feel free anytime you want to ask a question or check something out that I'm doing. I'll be glad to do that. Okay. Last year I was here and I did pouring watercolors and a la Nita Ingalls. And I don't know how many of you saw that demonstration, but last year as this year I did not start and finish a painting, but I did finish the painting. So I picked up the painting and brought it to show you. Some of you may have seen this, but this is the painting that I started last time I demonstrated here, but I didn't finish, so I did finish it. This is all poured color. The way this works is you just actually make a big bullseye, and I may do a demonstration of that today on another painting. You start with yellow, and then with your reds, and then with your blues, and then you shake it around and let it blend and come together. And I'll try to do that for you today because it's an interesting process to watch. But that's one way that I start paintings. I have some things here. These are two little drawings, as a matter of fact, that I did yesterday. I don't know whether you can see these or not. I'll just hold them up here. In my drawing class, we were fortunate enough to have a model yesterday. And her name is Sarah Timmons from Brookings. I don't know whether any of you know her. She's just a delightful young woman, and she was an excellent model. And she posed for us at like 10-minute intervals. So this is a 10-minute drawing of Sarah. The drawing that I did yesterday of Sarah. She was laying on the table with her feet up. She could also take a lot of positions that the rest of us were groaning that could possibly do that. Is not something where someone can pose for a long period of time. For one thing, people can't smile when they're posing. I've got a piece here that I'll show you. I brought a lot of things. This was done at the Brookings Gallery. Some of you were there that night. And this is a young woman who is living with Tom and I, and she's an exchange student from Denmark. And we did this at the gallery. But when you do this kind of work, the model is sitting there for 20 minutes, they can't smile. A smile lasts just seconds. And since I like to do smiles and I like to do interaction between people, I work from photographs. I almost always try to take my own photographs, except when I ask Marilyn to do them for me. But it's better if I work from my own, even if my photographs are not as good as hers. This is a photograph that I took of the model while she was at the gallery posing, and I finished it at home. He's captive, you know, in my house, and this is a pastel that I did of her. Her name is Roskava, and she is from Denmark. I asked her, I was asked if I would demonstrate in the Azalea Festival, and I said, sure I will. And I said, Roskava, would you like to demonstrate in the Azalea Festival with me? And she said, sure, I can do that. I asked some of my friends at Pelican Bay to demonstrate with me, and they said, no way. Not going to do that. Got a lot of paper here. Okay, here's my photograph. I like to put lots of colors in the hair. I got pinks and greens and blues and all of this kind of thing. I probably could have had this a little better organized. I'm looking for a particular photograph. And I'm not finding it. I do, as I say, like to take my own photographs. This is our exchange student, Roskava, and her boyfriend, who came from Denmark. So we had two teenagers for 2 weeks. And of course, our baby is 36, so this is quite an experience for Tom and I. But we made it. And what I'm looking for first in a painting is composition. And so I liked this composition. We were in Southern California, and I took this picture of these two kids. And so I'll show you how I start a painting in 2 minutes. And I'll... Yeah, you do. Pencil. Okay, what I'm looking at is the overall composition and the things that I like. I like the interaction between these two people. I like the way she's kind of leaning into him. But the first thing that I want to think about is how is it going to look on the paper? If I know that I'm going to work at least this big, so I want to fill this space. Of course, first decision, is it horizontal or is it a vertical? And of course, it's vertical. So I have my paper vertical. And then I'm going to draw very quickly, and then I'm going to talk to you about what I've drawn and what my thinking is on it. Thinking about now is it too big? Is it too small? How does it look on the paper? How does it feel? How does it go together? Is this negative space over here interesting to look at? Is this negative space over here interesting to look at? Comparing these will be the positive shapes here and the negative shapes here. You want everything to be interesting to look at. So that's the decision. I only have 30 seconds in this. If I had stood here for an hour and drawn one eye, and it was too big or too small or on the wrong place on the paper, I would not want to erase it because I have so much time invested in it. If I had spent 30 seconds planning, it's not right, I'll turn the paper over or put it in the trash or start over. But I'm thinking that this is working. This is working pretty well. Anybody questions or comments about gesture drawing?
Did I hear that about putting it in the trash?
Yeah. What Marilyn's referring to is that I don't allow students to put anything in the trash in my presence.
My animals shoot on real well.
You have to take it home and put it in the trash. Okay, anybody questions or comments about gesture drawing? When I teach life drawing, we start out every life drawing class with 10 to 15 gesture drawings. This is good warm-up. It gets your whole hand in. It teaches you to see. It teaches you to see the whole thing all at once. And you're not concerned about details of eyes, nose, and mouth. And of course, Coretta last month at Pelican Bay gave you all the proportions of the human head. So another thing that I might do is find the eye level line here and the center axis of his face here, his nose here, and she gave you all this information again, so I won't do it again. But notice this slant. That's important. Notice this slant on the center axis of Roskava, and here's the eye level line. Most beginning artists put the eyes too high in the head. The eyes are halfway between the top of the skull and the bottom of the chin, and you can prove this to yourself by just measuring. But those are the things, that's the way I would start a painting. Then I would do a more detailed drawing. This is just a pencil drawing, and I'm trying to think in terms of lights and shadows and value changes. When we talk about value in art, we don't mean how much it's worth. We mean all the darks and the lights and the grays in between. So that's what I'm...
pencil do you use?
I use a lot of different pencils, but I like really soft pencils like a 4B or a 6B because I can get really intense lines, and there's a lot of things that you can do with smudging. If the final artwork is a pencil drawing, I probably take more care than I do with something like this, where I just, this is not my end result. This is to be disastrous because you get one, and then you get the other, and then you lose one, and then you lose the other, and it goes back and forth like that. So that's my next step. I do use tracing paper. A lot of times I draw on tracing paper because I'm a scribbler. And what you can do if you're a scribbler is you can trace over, get another piece of tracing paper and lay it on top and trace over the lines you like and leave the rest. But I do trace it in order to transfer. So this tracing came from this drawing. Now, those of you who know how to transfer with tracing paper, you can put graphite on the back and then lay it down and go over your lines again. Or you can use graphite paper. And this is commercially processed graphite paper, or you can make your own. And that's another lesson, to make your own graphite paper. Be careful of graphite paper. Some people that I know bought some that was very oily, and for some reason it stained their paper. So,
It won't erase.
pardon me?
It will not erase.
Yeah, several people had some disaster. I had not run into that until just recently, but it did happen. We're a number of people. So what I have done is I transferred, this is the cake that's in the oven that I need to hide here. I transferred this onto a sheet of watercolor paper. This is 300-pound Arches paper, which is my favorite. And I did try using the Kilimanjaro paper from Cheap Joe's, which I thought I was really going to like because it was so white. And I brought a piece to show you today. This is Cheap Joe's Kilimanjaro paper. And if you could see the difference, like, what do you mean white? This is so much whiter than that I thought I would really like it. But what I found for me is that the color seems to absorb, and the paper feels spongy.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference in the paper. But this is a start of Louisa, who is in the painting up here. I'll talk a little bit about these paintings as I go along today. Louisa is an Indian woman, and she lives in Paradise, California, and she's a teacher. She teaches Indian children from dysfunctional homes. And she came and spent a week with me. Are you familiar with Jim Kosvatic? The watercolor wheel? Yes, Tom?
Most of us cannot see it.
Oh, okay. Well, you can see it after this. We'll just move that. Temporarily, and then I'll put it back. This is called Louisa Laughing, and it's I did it from a photograph. You could never hold this kind of a pose for more than a second, as I said before. It's mostly all watercolor, but there is some pastel in her hair. So I do some mixed media. While I'm up here, this is, can you see this one? I'll move this back again. 300-pound expensive paper, and you don't throw it away because there must be something that you can do with it. So a lot of times I have students bring these things to my class, and we'll have what we call failed watercolor paintings, and we go over them with Prismacolor pencils, with pastels, with inks, with all kinds of things. This happens to be a painting that I did in watercolor that got away from me. So now it's oil on paper. And I'm very happy with it now, and I was not happy with it because sometimes you make mud, and that's what I had done, and I wasn't happy. Going up to, we talked about Louisa, going up to this one up here, this is my granddaughter, and the reason that I brought this in is because this is another mixed media. I started out with watercolor and Prismacolor pencils, and then I took a toothbrush and some gesso and spattered the sand and some sparkles in the water. So I call that one Sand Castles. I call this one Moonlight Swim, Louisa Laughing Sandcastles. And this one I call Smiling Irish Eyes.
And easel over Sarah and stand next to it.
And as you can see back in the corner, my model is there. What happened on this is Tom had been a president of an organization in the Bay Area, and when the president would retire, they would have someone paint an executive portrait of him. And the administrator of the organization asked me if I would paint it, and I said, I don't do executive portraits. That's not what I do. And he says, well, why don't you just do what you do? And I said, okay. So I did what I did of Tom as a gift to him for retiring as president of that organization, and I got paid for it. And I have the painting.
It's gorgeous. Have you ever shown it?
I have it hanging in my house, and I have people at the house all the time, but I don't know whether I've ever put it out to show, maybe. Since '85, how can I remember? This is a painting of a young woman, I don't know, in Southern California there's a school of music and art called Idlewild at Mount San Jacinto, and she was a student up there, and we went up there to hear, I think it was at Christmas time, hear the Messiah or some really, really nice music. And here was this young woman about 15 or 16 years old, and she had this huge cello, and she had her arms draped around it, and she was laying on it. And I thought, oh, I have to paint that young woman. She is just marvelous. So I went down and talked to her and arranged to meet with her. Well, of course, for the concert, she had her hair all done up in a bun, and she was all dressed differently. And when I got there, she had on this big baggy shirt. She had her hair down, and I thought, oh, that's not what I wanted. But I took a lot of photographs. I did a number of paintings. I've sold a number of these paintings. I've also collaged music on these paintings, which I got in serious trouble for because I took them out of the piano bench, and they looked to me like they were falling to pieces. All this sheet music, you know, that was just crumbling away, and I glued it on my painting, and my husband told me it was his and very valuable. So
Now it's more valuable.
yeah. After that, I Xeroxed it and tore it up and put it on. Okay. I'm sure you're tired of my talking for a while, so I'm going to get started with a little bit of painting, and then I will talk some more. I'm going to start by laying in the skin tones, and I don't normally work upright. I normally work more flat or a little bit at an angle, although I tell my drawing students to always work upright because your drawing is distorted when you lay it out on a table, and it will look just wonderful, and then you put it up and you say, oh, it's all wrong. So it's good to work upright, but working with watercolor is a little bit hard that way because the paint runs. Have you ever watched Charles Reed work? Any of you know him? He lets it run and splatter, and it looks great, and he doesn't care. Anyway.
There's another gentleman here that does that too.
Oh, I know. He paints a picture in an hour, and then he paints a portrait in 20 minutes. There's a couple of them that do that. Okay, I'm going to mix a color called New Gamboge. I like Daniel Smith's paints. I like the quinacridone colors. I also like Winsor Newton paints. Those are the two that I use most. So I just want to get a mixture of a quinacridone, I got that on my brain, New Gamboge and cadmium red. If you notice, I have a little map of my paints. That's because I forget the names. I know where the colors are and what they are, but I brought this with me. The way I have my paints set up usually is I have all the transparent paints together and all the staining paints together, and then the opaques or the blackening colors. You all know what I mean by those terms? Okay, you're not beginners. I won't bore you with explanations.
Maybe just a little bit.
Maybe just a little bit. Well, I tend to want to use as transparent a color for as long as I can, so that I can lift and rub out and move things. So I'm going to try this color, and I'm going to move my easel a little bit this way. And I'm just going to start. I need a bigger brush. I always use the biggest brush that will do for the job. Notice that I'm painting right over the eyes. I'm not trying to keep those, the white of the eye is not white. I can paint into her hair and it won't matter. On the edge of the hair, I don't want a hard line. So what I'm doing is I'm just simply wetting this area here so that the paint will blend itself in and there won't be a hard edge where his hair meets his face. This boy's name is Christopher, Kristoffer.
My son is named that.
The same spelling?
Yes. From 1594 on the Norwegian family tree.
Uh-huh.
Christopher Meisen.
You mean there's Norwegians in here?
Yeah, I have
Yeah.
blood back here.
Well, there's a Dane sitting up here.
You
The
should
war
come and
is
meet
about
my
to begin.
Danish exchange student.
And Yehudian.
What was that color again?
New Gamboge and cadmium red.
You mix the two together?
Mm-hmm.
In what ratio?
Ha-ha. Anytime the art books start talking about percentages or scientific things like this, I tune out. I mostly look at the pictures in art books.
Yeah.
So I found that if I stay with the non-transparent, non-staining colors, I'm going to be all right. It's when you get to those staining colors like the phthalos that you can get in trouble.
I like to put a little bit of color here and there.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what I have found is that we all work different. And as much as I admire someone who works in a different way than I do, I try it and then I don't work that way. I go back to my own way. And I'm constantly trying to re-educate myself, or continue to educate myself. Last year I took a class from Jan Kuntz up in Florence, and that was wonderful. We had a great time. What you do when you take classes, whether from me or from anybody else, is you take for you what works for you, and then you are the artist that you are, and you're always going to be that. So you need to just take what works for you and don't try to do what doesn't work for you. Like science and math don't work for me. What percentage of bread? 40%. We've got some other Jan Kuntz people in here. But you know what we're talking about is Jan Kuntz says and teaches, and she's absolutely right, it's wonderful, that the highlight side of the face is 40% lighter than the shadow side of the face. And that's what she teaches, and it works. It really does. But you know, what's 40%?
Yeah.
So what's a little less than half?
Value 4.
Notice I painted right over the teeth and right over the whites of the eyes. Teeth and eyes are not white. And then when I want to soften these edges, anytime you want to soften an edge, you just run water right into it. Doesn't matter whether this is a hard edge here next to the hair, but I don't want any hard edges in some areas. Okay, I think I've got him a little yellow in here, and I want him a little more pink, so I'm going to add a little more of that cadmium red and just put some more color on his face.
45% now.
Thank you.
Is that on the red side or
This is more on the red side.
Yeah.
I have had people who had these, have you ever heard the term pasty face? This is a term I've heard from my husband. That if you have someone, I have students sometimes who have something that has a pasty face, and I'll tell them to run a red wash on it, and they say, "Oh, can't do that. I mean, how could you just run red right over top of that?" But you'd be surprised how it works. But you have to be gutsy enough to do it. I learned this tissue thing from Jay and Buzz, that when you work upright, you gotta wipe it.
You don't wear canvas white shoes.
There you go. There you go. And usually there's a lot of color in the ears, so I'm going to add some more red in the ears. Now you'll see when I work on this a little bit later that I will lay more than one color on at a time and let the colors blend themselves and paint themselves. But for right now, I want this to kind of dry. So before I start going in and looking for shadow shapes. So I'm just let that.
Where's your hair dryer?
It's there. I have it on here on the floor. But I have something else to do and something else to show you that I can just let that dry. I told you that I continue to take classes, and in May I'm going to take a class from Don Andrews. This is going to be in Medford, and look at that figure. And I have to know going in that this is, I can learn something from doing this as I can learn to pour paint and do things, but this is his style and not mine, and I'm going to go in and fix it up. But, you know, I still can learn something, and I try to take at least one big workshop every year, Jan Kuntz or Don Andrews. But anyway, if anybody wants to go to Medford in May, he's going to be there.
What's the name of that fellow?
His name is Don Andrews. Would you like to look at the book?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you would love it.
Class through.
Pardon me. Their art association over there, I got a flyer in the mail. But this is one thing that I want to show you that he does, is he links all these shadow shapes, and that ties the whole figure together. So anyway, Greta, I'll let you look at this book. You're welcome. And there's a picture of me in there, too. Okay, this is one way that I have of starting a painting. Now I'm going to show you another way that I have of starting a painting, and this is by pouring. or just really, so I'm going to be working here, and you won't be able to see everything I'm doing, but I'll try to talk to you about it as I do it. What I have is, this is a photograph taken by Marilyn Ard, and these are two little Indian girls, and I saw this photograph and said, please, please let me have that, let me buy that. We ended up trading some classes for the photograph. I did the sketch, and I can pass this around so you can see it, but what it is, it's a little round girl and a little skinny girl, and they are all dressed up in their traditional, telling me what a Maryland?
Polola.
Okay, thank you, because I didn't know that word. And they're kind of backstage, but I think one of the things that attracted me to them is the feet. You need to look at those feet as I pass this around. And I just was fascinated by it. I cropped it some. I wanted to include the boat, but I think if I ever get this painting finished, I'm going to call it Backstage, because I think that they are standing backstage getting ready to do their performance. So I'll let you pass that around.
Actually, they just finished it and they were told to finish.
Well,
So that you can get away with that.
artistic license is going to let me say it's backstage. Okay, again, I did the drawing, I did the tracing, then I put it onto a piece of watercolor paper, and I use masking fluid. And I want to tell you, I hate masking fluid. Every time I use it, I try to make it look like I didn't use it, because it makes such hard edges, and it always bothers me. But we've got all these little white shells and all these little patterns that I didn't want to lose, and in a painting like I'm doing over here, I can paint around them, but in the process that I'm going to do right now, I can't paint around it. So I wanted to be sure that I saved those whites, because as you know, as a watercolor painter, you have to save the whites. If you're working in oil or acrylic, you can paint black over white or white over black, but watercolor you've got to save. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run washes all over this whole picture, through the figures, all over. I'm going to fill the whole page with color. And then that will be allowed to dry, and then I will go back in, take out the masking fluid, and paint the figures. This will be another thing that will not be finished today, but hopefully you'll see it hanging in your gallery one day. And thank you, Marilyn, for the photograph. Okay. Betty Sherberg came to one of my classes one time, and she looked at my palette, and she said, I want you to know that I cleaned my palette out before I came to this class, and then I look at yours and it's all dirty. And start something, I need some clean space on the palette so that I don't make muddy colors to start right away. So I'm going to just wipe up this palette, but you might be interested to look at this black color that I have, and I'll show you where I used it later. The black that I've made, I never use black watercolor paint. The black that I'm using is Winsor green, Winsor blue, and alizarin crimson, and it will make as black as you want, particularly if you layer it up. So, anyway, we'll clean this palette so the teacher will be impressed that we have a clean palette. I work with these sponges to control the moisture on my brush. And I also work with natural sponges like these to paint with and to lift out and to soften edges and these kind of things. Sponges are good tools to work with in watercolor.
Sarah, can I go back to the combination of colors you just said? Would you repeat those, please, for the black?
For the black, Winsor green, Winsor blue, and alizarin crimson. If you use black watercolor paint, it looks dead. It's very dull and very dead. Okay, I have visions of this. I use the photograph and I use the figures, but I want to change things. So, and I'm thinking that I want a lot of yellow and red and maybe some, where's my map of colors?
Down there.
Let's run on here. I think I'll take my tracing away. I keep my tracings because if this painting doesn't work out, I still have this. And this is where a lot of the time-consuming work is concerned. So I still have that to work with. So what I'm doing now is I'm activating some colors. And this is New Gamboge. Another yellow I like a lot is Aurelian. Aurelian is a wonderful color. And then I'm going to use some cadmium red.
There's a transparent colors like,
These are transparent colors, yes. I call the opaque colors devil colors. And any of your colors that have a whitening or black in them, they don't mix well with other colors. Your transparent colors you can just keep mixing one on top of, you can make 15 layers of paint in transparent colors and not make mud. But it's when you get those opaques in there or those staining colors that you get yourself in trouble. Okay, this is Windsor red, and I'm going to put out some cobalt blue, which is a very true blue. I want to get all this paint ready because when I start painting, I've got to do it really fast because I want the paints to mix together. And you know, I hope I don't get any paint on this carpet. This is brand new carpet, isn't it?
It's all right.
No, shampoo.
Okay, I didn't even think about that.
And then we'll send you the bills.
It's called Opera. Have any of you used Opera? I love that color, and I think it's pretty opaque. But when I mix it with something else, I think it works. But I think these little girls need some Opera in their life, so I'm going to use Opera. And I might want some burnt sienna, so I'll get that ready. Although I'm not quite clear on what the burnt sienna. See, with the burnt sienna and the blue, we'll make gray. So I want to keep the burnt sienna away from the blue, whereas the other colors that I've got here will all blend together and be no problem. So I maybe better wait on the burnt sienna and add that later. But I do want that color. You're familiar with this color? It's very much an Indian color. See, it's a red-brown color. Okay, first thing I'm going to do, this is one of my best tools in the world. This is a Windex bottle full of water. And I'm going to wet this piece of paper, and I'm going to wet it pretty wet. You can wet it with a spray bottle like I'm doing, or you can wet it with a brush. But this seems to work pretty well for me, is to get it really wet with the spray bottle.
It's going to curl that paper on there.
This is 300-pound paper, so it should be able to take the water. If your watercolor paper does buckle, you can always get it to straighten out again because the paper has a memory. So you just take a mister bottle, spray it, put cover paper over it, and put it under books for overnight, and it'll straighten out. You know, as I'm standing here spraying this, I remembered something else I wanted to tell you. This painting over here was framed at here in Crescent City by Dennis at Ben Franklin. He's been very good to work with. I really appreciate him. I tell him what I want, and he does a really good job. I wanted to give him a plug because he works very well with me. What I have to do when I go in there is I say, I want this mat, and I want this mat, and I want this mat, and I want it an oval cut, and I want this molding, and I don't ask how much anything costs. Because if I ask how much it costs, then I start economizing. So I just have to say, this is what I want, and then he tells me how much it is. What I should learn to do is to do my own, but that's such labor. Okay, I've got this pretty wet, and I may kind of run it off a little. I'm not sure I've got it wet enough. I may just take a big brush and wet it a little bit. Get it a little wetter. Sometimes I wet the back too. Reggie, we're talking about buckling. If you put an equal amount of water on the front and the back of your paper, you'll have less buckling. stapling because you even out the moisture on the paper. I'm sorry.
Done your painting,
Uh-huh.
it's warped. Do you just wet it on the back, or?
I wet it both. Back and front.
I think you told me that was a bird's nest.
Yes.
I did.
And-
Remember? And it did. I finally got it flat.
And you were afraid you were going to ruin it by putting water over
Yeah.
your painting, and you didn't. Yeah, it's really hard to make yourself spray water on a finished painting that you love, but it does work. Another thing that I've done is put paintings in the bathtub underneath the water and scrub them out, and you don't disturb anything else on the page.
Wow.
It's kind of amazing.
Oh, you mean if you want to get rid of one little part of it?
Yeah. Or, there's also stencils you can cut out and wipe away. I do a lot of different things. I even have an electric eraser that I use.
Did you ever soak it overnight though, or?
And stretch paper, yeah. I love working on stretch paper. I just don't like to do it.
What does that mean, stretch paper?
Oh, that means that you soak it and then you staple it down. And of course, when I was in college, we did it with paper tape. Now they use staples and tape. And there's all kinds of elaborate ways of stretching paper, and it's wonderful to work on because it's tight as a drum. It's really nice to work on, but it's just a lot of labor. And
But you let it dry first, once you staple it?
you wet it, and while it's wet, you staple it. Then it shrinks, and that's what pulls it tight, makes it tight like a drum. Okay, I think I have that about wet enough. It's really, really wet. And I'm just going to start putting some color on here. And I'm going to start with this new gamboge. And I'm going to just put it all over everything here. In the center, over the figures. I'm not concerned about their skin tones because if I put skin tones over top of this yellow, it's still going to work. I know you can't see exactly what I'm doing, but particularly those of you who are far back, but I've got this big brush and I'm just making a big ellipse of new gamboge over the top of the figures. I'll hold it up in a few minutes and you'll be able to see it. To the cadmium red, and I'm going to run that right around it. Scary, huh? It's only a piece of paper. And if you have the drawing, you have it. Okay, I'm going to put some of this opera right in here. And I like the way that color mixes right here. I don't know how it'll do with the blue, but we'll see. I think I'll bring that clear down. Okay, I'm going to come with the cobalt now, and I'm going to come right in around the red. If I did not get enough paint on in this first application of paint, then I can let it dry and run these washes again. So if I need to get more paint, that's what I'll do. I've just sort of painted the blue across the top, the right side, and down across the bottom, and a little bit in this corner. I'll show you what I have here. I have just kind of like a bullseye. Now I'm not going to let you look at this too long because I need to start manipulating the paint. And by doing that, I'm having it run together. And here, let me. I may not have enough pigment on this for this to work as well as it should. But see, I've got the yellow next to the red, so when they blend together, they're okay. And I've got the red next to the blue, and when they blend, it'll make a purple. And I've got a line here that I don't like that I'm going to have to get rid of. But I just keep maneuvering the paint, and I think I don't have enough pigment on this. I think I'm going to have to run it again.
Do you wait for it to dry before you do it again?
I don't think so. Yeah, let's just go for it. Let's just go for it. I need more pigment. I was too stingy with the paint, I think, because it's not blending the way I want it to. So I'm going to run that wash again. Okay, I'm going to put more yellow, more paint. Remember that watercolor dries lighter. So if you put it on and you think that your value is just perfect, it's not, because it's going to dry lighter than what you have it. It's always going to dry lighter. That's a good theory.
Have fun working these things from one end to the other.
Say that again?
They say you're supposed to enjoy the color while it's wet and enjoy it later while it's dry, when it's dry.
Good.
You're the only one privileged to see these things happen as they happen.
Right.
That's true. You're behind the brush there, and that's your baby.
Okay, let's see what we've got now. Let's see if I can get those colors to blend. I always blame the humidity in this part of the country. You know, I'm from desert areas where things, watercolor particularly, responds in a different way. You know, another thing we can do to get this color moving is, see, I'm going to go over the carpet.
We can't hear you. Too much talking.
I'm making a mess. Yeah, as long as I keep it on the table, they won't get too mad at me. I'm trying to move that color. Some paper towels though, and I didn't bring any. Okay, I'll try to show you what's happening here. You just kind of watch this color and see what it does, and see what you like. Girlie, can you grab some of those paper towels? Use the masking fluid on the lace and on the hat, and then I ran all those washes, and that's the way this was started. That's the way that was started. Okay, I think let's see how we are on this over here.
We only have these kind of paper towels.
Thank you. I used a sponge, so I got a lot of it up. This is Kathy's last meeting. What? And I think she's of a little face, and I've also have a little map of the colors that I used, so that that I don't get confused about what I'm doing and what colors go on. So I will tell you now what I'm going to do. On the faces, up in the hair area, I'm going to put Windsor blue, Windsor green. Then I'm going to put a mixture of New Gamboge and sap green, and a mixture of alizarin crimson and cobalt blue, which will kind of gray. Those colors are going to be in the shadow areas on the faces that I'm just putting in. I try to stay away from earth tones for faces. I tend to like greens and blue and purple shadows rather than browns. Then down here in the lower area of the face, I'm going to have some alizarin crimson and burnt sienna and some New Gamboge. So those are the colors that I'm going to run right on the face, and I will put the colors on and let them blend themselves. So let me get these colors going here so that I can do it all at once, so that the colors can mix on the painting rather than on the palette. And let me see, where's my sponge again? Okay.
Immediately after Sarah's demo, we will then put it on our television show, and you can see exactly, in fact, in many ways the video is better, because then you camera is zooming in within 2 inches of the paper, so it's really very exciting to see the same demo again.
Alizarin crimson is one of my very favorite colors.
Was that a green you used, or did you mix that to make the green?
I'm using greens. Some artists don't use any greens at all. They mix them all. Nita Ingalls is one of those. She has no green on her palette. If I'm shaking water on you, I'm sorry.
I was thinking this outfit, so don't worry about it.
Okay. But I have Viridian and I have a sap green that I'm using. And if I write everything down, then I don't forget where I am when I'm standing in front of you trying to do it. If I'm at home, I can usually remember. Okay, let's see. I think maybe I should take this off. Clips. I put a little tissue between the paper and the clip because sometimes these clips can make rust marks on your paper. So you do kind of want to be careful. And I need my photograph to look at, and I kept track of it for the last 30 minutes. It's here. Okay. So I've got my photograph, and as you can see, this is the light side of the face. This is where the sun is coming in. This is the shadow side of the face. But on the shadow side of the face, there is always reflected light. Because we have lots of different kinds of light. We'll have a light side, a shadow side, and over here we'll have reflected light in the shadow side. And you can also have cast shadows, which can be a part of your composition as well. Okay, we're gonna. I'm going to start with some Windsor blue, and I'm just going to put it right up here in this hair. I'm working on a dry paper. Remember that the watercolor will only go where the water is. And I better get my tissue in hand, hadn't I?
Excuse me.
I don't have enough big enough brush.
You need a mighty brush.
You need a big brush.
A lot of kids have blue hair like that.
Sure they do.
Yeah. It wasn't purple.
This is the Windsor green that I'm putting in here. I want to keep the ears kind of red, so I'm not going to put that. Then I'm going to come in with my mixture of alizarin crimson and cobalt blue, which is kind of a purple color, and bring that in. I don't want hard edges here, so I'm going to come back with water and soften this edge so that it just blends by itself. And if I get it too much, I can always pull some out. My next mixture is alizarin crimson and burnt sienna. And I'm going to bring that in here and around here, more on the warm side here. This is more cool and this is more warm, and he's got a lot of this color in here that's up in here. And this is very light right here where we have some reflected light, so I need to take that out. Soften edges again. Okay, let's go with Roskaffer. Roskaffer also has blue hair. She's very, very, very blonde. This, no,
I like that dainty little brush.
you like that? Covers a lot of area fast. And then I think she needs a little Windsor green in here too, and maybe a little come down on her face.
Now, are you using those colors mostly for the shadows?
Yes. Remember, the shadows are going to be cooler and the light side is going to be warmer. This is a warmer green, the sap green, and the New Gamboge is warmer. Mix some of that in there. But I'm letting the colors mix on the paper. I'm just running one into the other. Very dark area over in here. Now what I want to look for is, my darkest darks, and see if I can get some more color in here. This is very dark here. Dark here. Dark in around the eyes.
Now, is this more like the jam cup style?
Yes. And then I go in and fix it up.
Mess around with it your own way.
Yeah, yeah, because that's me.
That's your technique.
And I think that, the way you paint is so much a part of your personality. That, if you are a neatnik, you are a neatnik. If you are a splish-splash person, you're a splish-splash person. And you really, even though you would like to be a different way, you probably aren't. But if you can learn something from everybody and then just incorporate it into what you do, then that works. Okay, I don't want to have any hard lines here, so I'm going to soften this with water. And my water is getting very dirty. Can I talk somebody into clean water? Thank you very much. This is on the Kilimanjaro paper. This is the very same procedure that I have just done with the two portraits. I've just laid colors in. You can see the warm colors here, the cool colors here, and all these colors that I've laid in on the hair, the blues and the greens and the purples. This is called Louisa's blanket because she has this wonderful wrap around her with all the Indian designs on it. So this is just a little bit further along than this process, but it's the same process. This is my granddaughter. My granddaughter's name is Michael, and Michael's mother's name is Sydney, and I named my daughter Sydney 40 years ago when nobody ever heard of a girl named Sydney, and I always wondered whether she hated her name all of her life until she named her daughter Michael, and then I decided that Sydney was a good name for her. So this is Michael, and their living room at their house in Sacramento is like a gymnasium. There's very little furniture in it, but they do lots of cartwheels and headstands and walking on the hands, and she's doing some kind, but there's also mirrors on the wall. And I love the mirror images. So this is a painting that I'm going to do, and I have just started it as well. So I gathered up a bunch of stuff just to bring things to show you. So here again, I do the drawing, I have the tracing, I transfer it onto the watercolor paper, and this is my start for Michael and the mirror. I have a painting of my other daughter, Jamie, of a mirror image that I did, I don't know how many years ago, almost as many as this one of Tom. And she's combing her hair in the mirror, and what I did was I painted both images, and then I took some of that kind of pearlized acrylic paint and painted over the mirror image so it just looked a little bit different than the other image, and that was fun. I don't know whether I'll do that with this or not, but this is something that I'll be working on too as well. Another way of starting a painting. Okay, how are we doing on time?
All the time in the world.
All the time in the world.
You can paint all day.
You can paint all day, yeah. We may have to dry this. Because I have this painting almost finished that I can show you. So it's, you know, like I said earlier, it's like the cake in the oven in the cooking show. You know, you mix everything up and then you take the cake out of the oven. So I have a cake in the oven over here that I'll get out. But I could work, if I can get this dry, I could work a little bit more on it. But I'm beyond my time. Oh, somebody brought me some clean water. Thank you. I'm working now with cobalt blue and alizarin crimson to lay in some shadow shapes. And I constantly refer to my photograph.
You paint at night?
No, I don't do well at night. I just don't see that well at night.
Your light is so different.
Well, a lot of times I'll have a painting that I think is really good, and then I'll get it in a different light, and I think, oh, what happened? Now I'm just taking some cadmium red and putting on the top of that ear so it'll be a little warmer, a little hotter, and I'm letting it blend itself with the color that I have already on there. So a lot of times I like for the painting to paint itself. I just lay colors on and let them blend instead of mixing every color on my palette. I do the same if I paint with oils. I don't like to mix colors on palettes. I'd rather mix them on the canvas or on the paper. Sometimes you can't talk, you know, it depends on what you're doing. Betty Edwards' theories about drawing on the right side of the brain, that the left side of the brain talks and the right side of the brain knows how to paint and draw. And you can't really do both at once, unless you're Greta.
You're so funny.
Gotta pick on you. If I lost too much of it, I scrub it out. I've got a little brush. Let me see if I can find it. I don't want the white of the eye to be white, but I do have this little bristle brush, and that's my scrubber brush. Like, well, I'll show you when I get the painting that's close to being finished out. I'll show you where I scrubbed out things with this little brush. But you don't want to leave the white of the eye the white of the paper, because it will just be spooky. Or teeth. I may rub out some of these teeth, and I may rub out some of the white of the eye, but you don't want it the white of the paper, because it will not work for you.
Bleeding, yeah.
I'll work this in layers. I'll keep going back into it over and over again. I'll put it up, sometimes I put it up in the kitchen or the living room so that I'll see it out of the corner of my eye as I'm walking around, and suddenly I'll be doing something else and I'll see something and I'll have to go fix it. But I look at them for a long time and keep working and reworking and working them to death until I wish I didn't, but that's what I do.
Did I hear that?
You heard that. I'm not as bad as you. We have to take Marilyn's away from her. I need someone to take them away from me,
Marilyn
too.
took her own away from herself.
I need someone to take mine away from me, too, Marilyn. Because I just nitpick them to death.
What was that term you used?
Nitpick?
No, animal retention.
Yeah, something like that.
You tried to tell me one day that I was the type, you know what?
Now, that's not what I said.
So many words.
What did she say?
Bears repeating.
I don't really want to know.
Animal retention. Oh. Yeah. Okay, can you see even just with the shapes and the shadows how his face is starting to come out just with those shapes? Can you see over there? Yeah. Okay. Now, she's a little bit low for me to work on, so I may stop here and get out the other painting. I would just keep working and keep working, laying in shadows and laying in highlights and continuing to work. And here is a painting that I did of this same subject. I often do paintings more than once. Sometimes instead of spending a lot of time planning, I just jump in and do it, and if there's things I don't like about it, then I'll do it over again. So I have no problem with doing this painting over again because I'm not totally happy with this one. But
You made him better looking than he is.
did I? Oh, I thought he was pretty cute.
He was cute, but I think you made him better looking.
Do you?
What don't you like about that?
You're not supposed to tell.
I don't know yet, Coretta.
Okay. Looks good to me.
I was talking about this little scrub brush that I use. See this highlight here on the top of her lip?
Mm-hmm.
I scrubbed that out. I scrubbed out her nose and her cheeks. In here, no, I don't think I scrubbed that out. I think I left that. I have put in and taken out his eyes at least 6 times.
Get too used to that for me.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you scrub it out after it's completely dry or as it's when it's damp?
I think either one, but I've let it dry and scrubbed it out. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yes, his eyes, you made his eyes prettier than they are.
Okay.
Yeah, they're more open.
More open than they are. Yeah, that's what I said. The eyes have gone in and out. And what I do is I will take this sponge and wet it, and I will just scrub out the whole eye and put it in again. So, and
How many times can you do that?
with this paper, I know how many times have I done it, Tom? How many times have those eyes been?
4 times.
Yeah, 4 or 5 times those eyes have been in and out.
And
So
what paper is this?
this is 300-pound Arches paper.
Because I have so much trouble finding fuzzy.
300-pound paper is very sturdy. You just listen to it, see?
Material.
I think it's supposed to be pH balanced to last for 500 years and all this kind of stuff.
Now, when you're going to scrub it out, do you get it wet and then just pick it up with another brush?
No, I just take this little sponge, wet it with clean water, put it down there, and scrub it out. Now, if you have staining colors, you're not going to get it out. If you use non-staining colors, you're okay. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.